Hey guys and girls, Bored now back with you. On this video I'm going to be talking about The Institute, episode 3. It's called Graduation. Full spoilers from the start of this review, as always. I think I'm out with this show really, as far as reviewing it on the channel at least, because I wasn't too impressed with the first two episodes. I'd said I'd give it another go. This week it's a weekly show, that makes it a little bit more easier to come back for another episode and see if it picks up. And it didn't really. There are bits of this episode which are just laughably bad. There's bits also which I thought weren't too bad, and again I can see the potential in what they're building somewhat, and one or two scenes were quite well done, but again, it's just the problem with this show where if you say to me some of these ideas, and when I see some of them, I can see the potential in it, and I can see how if the execution is there, it can be an engrossing story and an interesting TV show to watch, but the execution just isn't there. Again, it just feels a bit flat, or there's just not enough kind of atmosphere to it, or enough tension, or just enough to the characters. Generally they just feel flat. Because it's a weekly show, I might still keep up with it as much as I can do and watch it and just see where it kind of leads. And I can always do a video when it's at the end maybe, but the thing is, there's a lot of other stuff at the moment, or a lot that's coming up. It is a busy time, and there's a lot more interesting stuff than this. Just things about it that are kind of repetitive, where you're getting very similar scenes, but they're not really adding enough to really intrigue you or hook you in. Or for me at least, because for example the Snagsby stuff in this episode, you get another scene of her talking on the phone to the mystery man, the guy who we're assuming is behind the Institute, or the big boss. I'm guessing at some point there's going to be a big reveal about who he is and his significance, but again, it doesn't really add too much. It's just a similar scene to what we got last week, a scene where her reputation is on the line, where she's being questioned by him. Once again, she's getting paranoid about the two other doctors. Sees them talking in the hallway, she's watching on this monitor that we see her watching the kids on throughout the episode, and you see her watching them on the monitor talking, and again the idea is that she's getting quite paranoid about they're talking about her behind her back, what's going on. And it's not too dissimilar to the scene from the last episode, where she was in her house and she just saw them out on the street talking. Graduation of the title is just the other end of the Haisha or Kaisha plot with her. She had a 13-day anniversary last week, and they kind of did a party, and so this is another example of you just having a similar scene where it's just because it's at the other end, where she's graduated from this next stage of this facility. She's come out at one point in the episode, she comes out of the back room, and because at one point she's talking about the room of dreams or something, or the dream room or something like that, and is sort of saying how that's supposed to be really dangerous and bad. And I don't know if that had something to do with where she's going to go at by the end of the episode, possibly because it was mentioned before, but you see her stagger out of the back room at some point, and she's really drained. Again, similar to last week, where they're giving her them cakes, and it's a celebration. It's oh, it's meant to be so sinister. And I get the point about okay, it's the other side, it's the graduation, but even so, it's a little bit repetitive. And just the whole thing with these kids and what's going on. It is just, as I said, just very kind of cheesy and on the nose. Some of it is like really melodramatic, because you get the fallout from that scene is that when they try to resist what's happening to Aisha, like one of them gets tasered, and like there's a lot of screaming, and she's like getting dragged away saying it's not my time, and she's taken off, as I said, into this back room. And you've got, because they've been working more with Avery, who's this younger kid who's got like super special powers and can like read people's mind, but to like a great extent. So like Luke and Nikki have been getting closer to him because they see him as, okay, we can tap into his power or his knowledge of the place to help us get out of there. So you get little bits like that, like Luke and him bonding a bit throughout the episode. But so he's listening into Aisha as she's being dragged off to this place, and he's saying where she is, but then eventually he loses her, and there's a little bit of panic from him. And as I said, there's supposed to be tension about her being dragged off to this thing, but there's just all these like cheesy scenes, or like people talking like just a lot of gibberish to tap into like stuff around the town. And there's like some sort of connection, like mental connection with him and Annie, and she just like has a freak out, and you just get like a buzzing sound, almost like it's meant to be like as I said, like a bee type effect, or just the sound of it reminding me of buzzing. And as I said, it just hits Annie, and she like has like a bad reaction, and like one of the other kids is just like, wow, okay, that's a big one. And then there's just some really on the nose dialogue, and they just shoehorn a lot of stuff in, because that's another thing about like the last week's episodes, really, is that there were some like really on the nose pop culture references. Like I remember there was an X-Files reference, which was kind of like cheesy, and the trouble is, like, again, some of the things this show is doing is a little bit X-Files, with like some of like the conspiracy stuff. And so the reference itself was quite lazy, but then the other problem is, don't remind us of stuff which is better. Don't remind us of stuff which is doing what you're trying to do, but doing it much better. That's an issue right there. But it's just the way they use some of these references, which is really cheesy and lazy, because like there's an exchange between Nikki and Avery. Nikki that then says, fucking A, you know, what happens in Fight Club stays in Fight Club. And, you know, it's just such a, like, oh, that was like really cringy use of that line. So that's the thing. I don't mind them using pop culture references like that, but just use it in a better way. Annie is just one of these like really annoying, okay, she's the eccentric old lady who has a past and is saying like kind of cryptic things, but she secretly knows what's going on. Like, she's got history with this place, but to like the average person, she's just gonna seem insane. And it's not surprising, because like when Will comes across her in the town in this episode, and it's not long after you've had the whole like her freaking out, wandering around like just talking gibberish, because like she's saying things like about the Dalai Lama and stuff about the 60s and different like conspiracy theories, and it's just all, as I said, just like ridiculous dialogue, and just her as this cliched. Because another thing is, like, when you think about a show like From, because this is from some of the same people, and it's from like the same, it's from MGM, also MGM Plus, who did From. And From I covered some of on the channel, and I do enjoy From. I would say, like, for the most part anyway. I do enjoy that show, but that show has a little bit of what this show suffers from a bit with like someone like Annie, is like it does have like these kind of wacky zany characters where they're just like wacky and zany almost for the sake of it, and just because it's like okay to cause a bit of like forced tension, or like, oh okay, is there something mysterious about them, rather than because there's really a place for it in the plot, and because it's not, because it still has to be well done, whereas Annie in this just comes across as like a walking cartoon character, so there's no real reason to care about her. And From definitely has some of that with some of the supporting characters, although it definitely has characters that tread that line a little bit, and so that's one of the problems with Annie, where I just don't really care about her. Near the end of the episode, where all this stuff is happening in the Institute, Annie is found by Will. It's convenient he's the one who finds her, but like she's found by him dead, and there's like pills near her body, and it's like okay, someone's killed her, but they're gonna try and make it look like suicide. And again, it's just stuff like that where you've seen okay, this stuff has been done a lot of times before and much better. The episode opens with Luke getting like some sort of an injection, and it's something to do with his brains, and it's almost like their version of like A Clockwork Orange, like that scene where he's being forced in the chair and being forced to like look ahead and he can't look away. And I think at first, because the opening bit, and you sort of get like a blurry perspective from inside him, that first bit was actually done like not too bad. But like you then cut to another scene and you cut back to Luke, and that's when you start to see okay, it's stuff in his brains, and once again he's trying to escape and he freaks out, and they sort of electropod him, and the guy who we've seen in these operation rooms and kind of forcing him to, you're doing this, there's no way around it, that sort of passive aggressive guy, he drags him away later and says okay, you're going in your room now for a while. And so when the first bit of the scene wasn't too bad, but when they just cut back to it, and again it's like okay, we've been here, done that. With Will's plot in the episode, which I've talked a little bit about, I actually didn't mind some of his stuff too much, at least on paper. Like there was some where I was a bit okay, that this is a little bit more interesting. Staying in like a hotel and we see him go down, and like the guy on the front desk is like looking at him suspiciously, like almost like watching him. And so once again it's this idea of like people in this town are in on the whole thing, and like the hotel clerk, because they've got wind that Will is obviously questioning things, it's almost like everyone's spying on him, including the guy at the front desk of this hotel. So yeah, sort of things like that I think can be quite intriguing and can be okay. That's because it was just a small little scene, but I thought yeah, that's quite a nice touch. And then you get a scene with him and Wendy, who's like his superior, who again, they got off to a bit of a rocky start, but there's this vibe with them that they're starting to bond a little bit more. But she's asking him about like the mini-mart shooting like last week, and about how he saved that guy's life. Like if it was like a few seconds longer, and if he hadn't got him to a hospital when he did, like he would have died. And again, there's meant to be this weird vibe in the scene where she's interrogating Will, and she's giving him like this very almost passive aggressive, so it's almost like the implication is that the powers that be wouldn't have wanted the guy to live for whatever reason. And we're not really quite sure why, but it's almost this idea of Will overstepping his mark, and like in their minds, like overstepping, you're going beyond the pale. This isn't our place to get mixed up in this stuff. If the guy dies, he dies. That's kind of the attitude. It's like it doesn't really concern the Institute. And I'm sort of expecting then you might at some point get a reveal then maybe they were somehow behind the shooting, which is really interesting with Will, and the scene where, okay, this is setting up something which does have potential. Bar, he does meet the reporter Katie, or Kate, who in the first episode, I think it was revealed that she's working for the Institute from the first episode, who was like an ex-girlfriend of Kate's, and was a little bit like Will. She was starting to question what's been going on at this place, like, and kind of challenging things. And that's why she was killed by this journalist. So they're almost using like someone like that who has access to things and has certain resources as someone they can use for like their own purposes. So I think it's almost like they're tapping into ideas of like the idea of this sort of like institution maybe controlling the media like to their advantage. So yeah, there's a scene with them in the bar where like they meet for the first time and they start to bond. I know she's kind of fishing to find out with Will, because she brings up the mini mart shooting. He brings up Annie, do you know like much about her? And she kind of has quite a dismissive like, well, there's not that many people as crazy as her in the town. And then he starts asking about the institution, and I think she dismisses it mostly as like just folklore and things like that, and things like UFO and but again, in that scene, it's what I'm talking about a little bit, where you're just getting like sort of buzzwords and not much else. But you can see what that scene is doing. You can see that, okay, she's on the inside, she's undercover, and she's kind of using the fact that she's gotten quite close to him and they've bonded over a drink to manipulate him a bit and convince him that there's nothing to this stuff, then there's nothing real sort of sinister going on at the place. So, you know, stuff like that, I think potentially there's something a little bit meaty there, because you can play with the tension of, okay, they have more scenes together, he gets closer to her, but what's going to happen then? Like, you know, is she going to try and kill him? There's sort of different things you can do. And like, it was a pretty decent scene overall, but yeah, once again, just very sort of flat this episode. Not a lot of tension, not a lot going on, and just doesn't really grab you, or it didn't grab me anyway. So that is The Institute episode 3, Graduation. Let me know what you guys think of it in the comments below. Like and subscribe as always. Share me out on social media. You can also support the channel at patreon.com/borednow, or you can be a channel member. 3 different tiers, and I'll put the link in the description to this video. Keep watching TV, guys, and I'll see you again soon. Bye.